Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good evening. Welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next hour here on Radio Hamra. Not taking any calls today because I have a guest which I'll be introducing to you shortly, and because of that, I'll do the book review on Wednesday's show. But let me introduce to you our guest tonight, an incredible artist. Ali Sabet is an Iranian-American artist and designer. His work shines with vibrant optimism, love, and beauty in the face of it all. And I can also add he's very humble because I asked him for a bio and he sent me something very brief, but we're going to get into all the wonderful things he does. Ali Jan, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's definitely an honor, and you'll find out I'm not short for words.
Good.
So I think we'll be good.
I'm happy to hear that. Neither am I. So we'll see if I think we'll get through this conversation maybe too quickly. But, as I mentioned, you're an incredible artist. If you don't know Ali Sabet, I'd recommend checking out his work online. On his Instagram page, he has a lot of things. He has a website. We'll get into the art. I could also mention how we connected, and it's kind of funny. It's such a 21st century kind of way of meeting. I had heard about you and your art through many people, but then one day we were both in the same clubhouse room and both came up to speak and then connected there and then met in the back channels, and then here we are.
That was actually really exciting because I'd heard about you through my wife because she was so when she had heard you speak, she's like I can understand everything he's saying because it's she speaks some Farsi, and so it was really cool to hear her be excited about you. And then when I saw you, I was like, I gotta talk to him. How you doing? So it was really cool to be able to meet you in that way. And Clubhouse had become a very comfortable place to be, especially with the NFT world and stuff. And I've met so many different amazing people that there would have been no way for us to meet, including yourself, including different actors and business people and things like that. It really changed the way we do business. And when I think about the things that have come out of it, I mean, me sitting here is because of that day.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think, social media, or also here it's sometimes called social audio, things like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces. Obviously, people will talk about how people go there and they distract themselves from relationships, but I think it's also a great way to connect with people. Like, we're saying we wouldn't have met if it wasn't for that night and that media or that way of connecting with one another.
Was it comfortable for you, like when you got on? Were you like, this is like the radio but interactive?
Yes and no. It's intro. I've done a lot of those. I've done Clubhouse rooms before, when it first was starting, maybe 2 years ago or whenever it was. But that was different because the NFT space, we won't go too deep into it, but that's a newer space for me. So NFTs, which for people who are completely unfamiliar with it, it's related to cryptocurrency in a way, but imagine art that's digital and you only can own it technically in a way digitally. We'll leave the remainder of the intro for a TED Talk or a masterclass another time. But it was, that space is newer for me, which I also think that's always something I try to be mindful of, is to go into new spaces, because I think our tendency is to stay in the same space. And actually, if we trace your career, which is something I want to do in some degree because of where you found your passion and your calling, we have to be open to new things.
Sure.
And so something I think is interesting, sometimes I'll work with couples, and it's a big thing is to recognize your partner. Although you think you know them, you don't fully know them because we're all so complex.
Right.
But I recognize the same thing is happening with ourselves, that we almost want to think, no, I don't like this, I only like that, because it feels safer and more comfortable to think I completely know myself. Right. Whereas we're much more complex than that. Until we allow the space to explore different things, we actually won't see what we enjoy, what we like, what we're passionate about. We have to expose ourselves, but that's always going to feel a little bit vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, getting on Clubhouse at the beginning and talking in front of whatever, even 5 people was not an easy thing, especially if you hadn't been on the radio, talk show host, or whatever else that may be. I mean, I had a little bit of experience from here and there, being interviewed or being on these smaller shows on YouTube, or doing my own, painting with my right hand and recording myself with the left. I'd kind of gotten used to some of that stuff, but being in completely exposed consistently every day in front of people was definitely something new.
Yeah, I think that's for a lot of people. It was in Clubhouse. It was interesting timing with the pandemic that people were just looking for a place to talk and connect, and it came out around that time, and it became what it became. But coming back to you as
Sure.
an artist, because I think, as I mentioned, I really hope people will check out your work. I'm looking. You brought me very kindly a piece of your artwork that's behind you right now. But you didn't start as a painter. It seems like you always, from what I'm gathering, were always artistic in a way, but you were first in branding and marketing side. So
Right.
maybe we can, as I was mentioning, tracing your career a bit to how you found what when I see you work, it looks very clear that it's your passion and your calling. But we can maybe talk a bit about that. So you started in branding originally, right?
I started well, I went to school for advertising creative. And then when I left, I was an art director intern at a couple of big agencies. So I worked on things like Kawasaki, AirTouch, Taco Bell, and I started my agency life on purely Taco Bell after my initial, stint at Bozal Advertising. So I was kind of forced into it because of the fact that there was really nothing else I knew that I was supposed to do, because I was just kind of like guided to like, oh, you don't have enough credits to be an engineer. You don't have enough credits to be a psychologist, whatever. Oh, what can I do? And they're like, oh, you can do communications. You can do advertising. And it was like basically a cop-out major at the beginning.
Okay.
And, but it naturally worked out to be the right place for me, at least for that phase of my life. Right. So I came out, I worked at Foot Cone and Belding, which I ended up designing for Taco Bell for, I want to say, 9 months. And my high levels of anxiety wouldn't allow me to work the right way.
Oh.
The bosses picked up on that, and they're like, you got to go. Like, literally, he's like, you got to go.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think the first day I went into the job, I ended up having a panic attack. I thought I was having a heart attack.
Oh, wow. Yeah, which is the most common thing people think when they're having a panic attack, is that it's a heart attack. Yeah.
So my poor boss had to take me to the hospital. So that's kind of how it started. And then when I left, I was like, you know what? Advertising seems kind of small for me. How many times can I say 99-cent burritos on the freeway and be excited about what I've done with my life? So I wanted something more impactful, and I found myself being a natural at identity development, brand strategy, creating things for people to make an impact in their life. So creating a logo for a restaurant, for example, it's something that I could still drive by today and see them and see it growing, and and you see the person, the mom and pop shop that's trying to grow, their lives change, and through that they were having transformational things happening, and I was a part of that. By showing them, like when I have transformational events in front of me, when I paint for someone, I was doing it through logos. So there was already, when I look back through my life, there was already signs of me creating, doing the healing stuff. All of that stuff was already there. It's just I wasn't aware that it was happening. Showing somebody their logo and their tears coming down their face was a kind of a normal thing. Wow. Male, female, whatever. Today I paint and I have those physical responses to the work. So when I look back, that was kind of the beginning of it. But alongside it, I had been drawing and illustrating all along since I was like 5 years old. Since I was in Iran. My mom brought me back my notebooks from when I was a kid. And, you have, the grade, and then you have a little doodle. And right next to the doodle, it says, Afarin, good job, or whatever. So I wasn't discouraged either. Like, as a kid, you doodle in your notebook, somebody's going to say, hey, you're not doing your math, or you're not doing your intro, or whatever it is. Whereas in this sense, when I read back, there was no, the subject matter has changed. The subject matter might have been, I remember I used to draw a lot of tanks and guns and planes. We all probably did. If you were, I don't know if you were in Iran during the war.
I was born here, actually.
You were born and raised here.
Yep.
So I came here when I was 10.
Yeah.
1986. So I did experience the war, and I think that used to come out in my work, obviously, as a child, right? All the way to 10, 11. And then we moved here, and I continued to draw, but it was more as a way of dealing with daily anxieties, trauma from whatever childhood, and then trauma here as a kid, learning how to be an American Iranian instead of a Iranian.
Yeah.
I didn't speak English. I had to learn how to deal with that. And I think drawing was always an escape. And but I wasn't good at it. Like, I didn't really try to get better at it either. You get what I'm saying?
But you enjoyed it from a young age, but you weren't necessarily good at it?
I wasn't good at it, no. I mean, I wasn't trying. Like, literally in college, I had one illustration class, and I got a D. And the teacher looked at me and goes, "Why are you here?"
Wow.
And I'm like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
She's like, "If you're not going to put any effort into this, why are you here?" And I think that's what she meant. And I remember doing one project that I did put effort into, and then she accused me of cheating. She's like, "This isn't you.
You it was so much better than the work you were doing up to that point."
Like, I used references like you said, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't believe it." And so
I had that reaction because, like, I think for people, it's always nice to hear, like, because they see your work now, and to imagine you got a D in an illustration class, it could be, give people some hope that, maybe means like you have more than you realize. I also wonder if you weren't, sometimes the things we really want to be good at, we're afraid to really try because we're like, what if I'm not good at it? So I've seen people, like, for example, want to maybe sing, but they're afraid to even give themselves a chance to really try because they can always hold on to the hope of maybe I can do it, but if I actually go for it, then I see what I've got. It's like, so I don't know if maybe there was some passion there and you were still waiting to find it or waiting to express it.
I think it was more of a resistance to learning. I've always had like I want things to be downloaded. Like I want it to be magical. I want it to be like, but every time I did take that step to learn something new, it made that magic even better. Like, so as I removed the resistance from creating, based on just what comes through, and I'm like, no, let me look at, people have done it for ages, let me look at how eyes are supposed to be positioned, let me look at how lips are supposed to be drawn. If you look at the feminine portraits that I was doing in 2013, which isn't that long ago, if you pay close attention, they almost look like mustaches in some ways, right? So it took me, and that resistance was there. I was like, no, I'm going to do it the way there was this like constant, because you always been told, or I had a job as a branding guy again, for 20 years, 25 years, to be perfect and to do things the way I was supposed to do them, so I can sell something for someone or make something pretty, like the Thayer's witch hazel bottle. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I got to show it to you. But when I was doing stuff like that, there was a purpose to it. It's design is objective, and there is no, there's some, flexibility, but at the same time, you have so many rules to abide by for something to be so simple, elegant, and powerful, that you're going to have a hard time being super creative. And then on top of it, you have a client telling you what they want or what they need. So when you're dealing with all of that stuff, there's not a whole lot of room for creativity, but more for objectivity and design and all that stuff. So when I was on canvas, when I would hold a brush, when I would hold a pen, no one could tell me like, oh, that's not good. Oh, it's ugly? All right, whatever. Well, I don't care. I'm going to do me. I'm going to put what's out. And what was coming out at that time was anxiety, fear, whatever that, that is.
What was going on inside of you.
Inside of me, the human aspect, right?
Yeah, that's, it seems like the interest was always there. I always think art is one of those fascinating things where, of course, like you see people and it's like natural and there's something about it, but often learning the techniques can be good, and then it's like people learn the techniques and then they learn to kind of break them in their own ways, or so it's like you want to be a dancer, it's like you learn all the moves, but then if you create something new, it's going to be different than anything that's out there. But usually getting some training can be helpful, even though it's art and it's so artistic. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I think training is great for basics and building structures, but also being able to go out and play. The way I got good at the craft in 2015, as I was telling you when we talked last time, I was like, I made a decision, like a conscious decision. If I'm going to be a painter, am I painting? I'm not painting, right? I'm not doing any, I'm designing, but I have this dream of being a painter and designing and creating work and selling my art. And over here, I'm literally all I'm doing is looking for the next client, designing, and it's really not going anywhere. So in January of 2015, I made a conscious decision. I'm going to go wherever I'm going to go. I'm going to go sit in a coffee shop. I'm going to paint, and I'm going to do it for hours. And that's really when you see the cusp of change. And I made a decision again, 2010, I made a decision that I was going to draw the characters like Stitch Bunny and all this stuff that I was doing. And I wasn't going to package it to try to monetize it. And then I did that again in 2015 as a painter. So character designer, it was like one chapter of my life, and then another chapter was painter. So accepting myself as a painter also took at least 5 years between me being a character illustrator to, no, I'm going to paint. It's different. I'm going to express all that is, not just this constraint character. Because, and that happened through the course of, between the 2005 and 2015 of exploring on canvas. Again, as I told you, a friend of mine, my wife would say, I've seen you do better. Why are you doing this messy stuff? And she kind of curated my work in a lot of ways. Whereas at first, again, there was resistance. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do me. I already do what other people want, while I'm designing. This isn't about that. And as I watched her kind of pick pieces, for example, one night she had put up pieces in her house. And when I came home, they were actually unfinished pieces. In her mind, they were beautiful because I hadn't taken the chance. I hadn't had the chance to mess them up yet. So, so for her, and that's when I started to again realize, like, I don't have to wear everything on my sleeve. I can hold some back. That it doesn't mean creativity doesn't mean you got to like blast, all your emotions onto one canvas necessarily. It could be,
right,
but it doesn't have to be as well.
Yeah. We're at a commercial break. I think there's a few really interesting points that maybe we can get to after the break. Even that decision to like see yourself as a painter, right. And even like I guess the thing that makes someone a painter is they paint. The thing that makes someone a writer is they write. Right. But what I think is interesting is when we look at it after the fact, it seems like it was always the case, but that person found their journey. Whoever, any writer you like, maybe they were a writer from the day they were born, but probably not. They had to find that. And I think that's the part where when we look back, it seems very easy, like, well, it was meant to be that way. But anyone listening right now, they're probably on some journey of figuring out what is their own path. And so we can maybe get into that a bit of how you found that. So again, I'm joined by Iranian-American artist Ali Sabet. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Again, I'm joined by artist Ali Sabet. Ali, before the break, you were sharing a bit about your journey, drawing from a very young age, but that around 7 years ago, you made this conscious decision that I'm going to be a painter, and what that meant. And I thought that was, to me, that's fascinating because there's a sense you have to believe in yourself in a way and trust in that and to take that step. And I think if anyone watches you paint now, they're like, oh, okay, so this guy's always been doing this. And that's what I thought too until you told me when we had a phone call a while back. And I find that fascinating for people to hear because, people might think, well, I'm like, however, whatever age they are, if I haven't done it yet, I'm not good at it or I shouldn't do it, but it's not necessarily the case. So what do you think got you to that point? It seems like a lot led up to it where you're like, you know what, I'm going to be a painter and let me go just do my thing in this way. And as you said, start working on that craft. I
think it's easy to look back and start deciphering like the moments in your life that were iconic for your future, right? It's easy to look back and go, I remember sitting in a boardroom at Draft FCB working on Taco Bell stuff while I'm listening, but I'm doodling a character and I look at it and I'm like, that thing is ugly. But there was also this sense of importance in it. Like, I know this is important. I know that someday that what I put on paper for some reason is important. I do look back and go, that sense of self-importance, was it influenced or induced because of a child that wanted to be seen? Or is it that it was really important? Because today I understand that my energy, my power, my whatever that moves people is not necessarily the subject matter, but it is the energy that's embedded in the strokes, in the lines, right? So that's what people are picking up on. That's what's moving them. It's something beyond me and you, right? And as far as in the physical reality, it's a channeling of sorts. And so when you look back and then you look here, so that's kind of a funny question that's always been on top of mind. Like, did I really know? Or was it something that I had made up? Or did I manifest this self-importance through, whatever you want to label it psychologically? Yeah, or were you tapping into, there was something there, like a unharnessed potential that was still, so it's like you had that within you. And it's hard to say. I used to see it literally as a brick wall in my head. There was this brick wall. I knew on the other side was infinite energy, infinite power, infinite ability. So my whole journey was about to break that. And then, so I see this journey as you see it as becoming a painter. I see it more as a journey of healing. And each point of, those real hardcore infliction points were really the next stage in the healing process. And so 2015 was the conscious decision of painting, but it was also the first time where I was sitting in a coffee shop, feeling kind of like a vortex surrounding me, feeling completely safe, feeling the anxiety falling apart, and then connecting, and nothing could bother me around me. Even in this coffee shop that's busy and people are talking and all this stuff, I'm in this zone. When I look back, I'm like, oh, that's the feeling that people get when they're meditating. So that's an alpha state, right? So scientifically, I can pinpoint it now. I can pinpoint it from an artistic standpoint where I was. I was in experimentational phase where I had all sorts of different tools with me. I literally had a huge toolbox that I had filled with markers and pens and pencils and papers, and I was messing around. And again, promising myself not to monetize that was important, because now I didn't have the pressure of making that painting make me money. So I would work all day, I would paint all day, I would go home and design at night and make sure that, help at home, whatever I could do, and then get back to working. So 2015 to 2019 was that process of transitioning out of full-time design to full-time painting. So there's so many layers and channels that are happening here. But when I pinpointed to that moment, I remember it was a piece that you can probably Google, that I remember this specific moment. It was called "I Love This Shit." You can Google "I Love This Shit." So, shoot, I love this shoot. That's what I meant, right? I love this stuff, and you can look it up. And what you'll see is that when you get to that point, and when you look at that piece, that was the first piece that I posted on social media. And there was a difference in the way people commented. So whereas everything else was an exploration of getting there, this piece was there. And it was a messy piece. It was crazy. It had all sorts of things in it. But for some reason, the response was different. And that was when I knew that I could actually sell it, because 2 people commented, "I want this." And that was like the magical words of and I think that was the first piece I sold a print from, and the original still in my archives. And it was a turning point again. So when you look at these things, and then 2019 again being another turning point.
I think it's, the way you even described, you were in that, the busy coffee shop, but you were tuned into something within. And you had to also, and not everyone will have this luxury, thankfully I think you did, to not have to worry about monetizing it, so you could just focus on it, so you could listen to the voice within rather than only the voice outward of what's getting validated or not. Now, eventually you did, and you talked about getting feedback, obviously, but you need to tap into that first, I think, to express that.
Sure.
And only could you do that when you kind of silenced what was external as far as what was going to be the, good or
the
bad.
Response? Yeah. I mean, at that moment, it's not even about the response. It's the mind quiets, the work comes through. It goes beyond just expressing what was back in, again, 2005, which was anxieties and pains and things. Now you're going through a healing process where it's a meditative process versus a, again, as a friend described it, as puking on canvas, right? So it was a different feeling and different vibration and frequency, which we can get into healing stuff. I know you're if you want to, but that was the first steps of healing, which means transcending the psychological stuff, not necessarily working through it, which I had tried, as most of us do, the traditional ways, but this was on a different energetic and frequency kind of situation where you start to rise above. And that was the beginning of it.
I mean, you mentioned anxiety, because that's anxiety is not one of those things we can completely get rid of. And even if we look at what it means to have anxiety, we need some level of it, or even stress. Like if you're going to take a test and you have zero stress, you won't do well. As far as some level of alertness there.
Sure.
So anxiety is one of those things that we need a bit of, but then when we have too much, it gets in the way. I love watching sports, and you see, great players at the free throw line with the game online, and they might get nervous. The anxiety gets in the way of that player expressing their talent, their ability, right? And so I think as artists, I'm sure that can happen too, where the anxiety would get in the way of it coming out, but quieting it then allowed you to tap into what was there. Or socially, people have that. If they're, I work with people and they have social anxiety, and they think, I don't like being at the party, but then they actually realize, I want to be at the party, but I get so uncomfortable, I go home. But if I can actually allow myself to be myself and have fun, I'd want to be there. So it sounded like there's some parallel there too, as an artist, that you quieted that anxiety a bit to tap into what was within you, but I don't know if that's how you see it.
My anxiety was probably more extreme. It was something that was there consistently all the time at high levels. So it wasn't something that got in the way. It was something that was constantly happening, and it was in the work. When I decided that I was going to paint full time and I was experiencing that moment, for example, the anxiety dissipated and I was able to, again, channel something else that was embedded in the work that people saw. And people seem to see layers in works. The more complex a work piece gets, a painting gets, the more people feel it. They feel every single layer. I have paintings that are whitewashed, which means I painted 5 or 6 layers of love, happy, cute, anger, whatever, and then I'm like, I don't like this, and I whitewashed it, and which means just a layer of white on top of it. Took a picture of it, posted it, and people were like, oh my God, there's so much power in this. I feel the love, I feel the anger, and that's because all that energy is embedded. Now, anxiety for me now today, I get anxiety here and there, but it's more like a spidey sense. Like, okay, I'm feeling this right now. I don't know why I'm feeling it. I need to pay attention to what's going on and what I need to shift, and maybe I'm not attending to something that needs to happen. So it works for me rather than constantly rule my world of like 80-90% of my day spending on dealing with the anxiety and fear, and then I have 10 minutes to do this logo, for example, which is what I call the genius of anxiety also. I don't know if you would. I would love to hear your point.
That's what I mean. Is I think in subtle levels, it's actually needed, or even in small ways. For example, like I'll be doing something. I'm like, I'll feel something like what I'm like. Oh, I have to call that insurance company about that thing, and it's the anxiety that if I didn't have that feeling, I would have forgotten about that thing I need to attend to. So we have anxiety, so we notice things that can go wrong, pay attention to things that could be happening, and it could be like a spidey sense. Yeah, exactly. So but again, when it gets extreme, then it gets in the way. But at a lower level, it could be tapping into something that actually has a lot of meaning. So that's why I got the sense from you that it wasn't that anxiety disappeared completely, but there was some way that even that, it was very meditative. Like you were able to tune into something within yourself that was like, you were able to get to the source within yourself. And it reminds you of something someone told me a few months ago I thought was really powerful, that a lot of times artists get revered as kind of like gods, and whether they're musicians, painters, and all that, and it's like superhuman. But this person was like, they're not superhuman. True artists are even more human than the rest of us, because they're tapping into that which is within all of us in a pure way and expressing that, and then when we see it, we connect to something within ourselves. So I thought that was cool to think of artists not as superhuman, but even like super at being human in a way, like getting into that who we were. And it seems like in your art, when I see it now, like you're expressing something within yourself so purely that it's like you're tapping into something that's really just like you, and then a lot of people can connect to that, because as humans we all of course share.
I feel like
so
the
much.
subject matter is a lot of me, and I feel like what comes through, which is the main things that actually impact, are actually within the line and the strokes, like the script. Like I write a language that I can't read, or it comes from a different place, and I rejected it for the first few months, and then as I let it come through, then it was impacting people the same as a painting of a female portrait, right? So that's when you know that it's not necessarily. And when you see me do script, I'm not consciously thinking, I'm actually letting it pass through. So there is something to be said about, yes, expressing my anxieties or fears or love or whatever, my human emotions, versus actually being a clear channel for what comes through. And if you can do both at the same time, you can get some interesting play. It's not like I'm always out of the way. There's no way, we're human, right? There is going to be days where I'm pissed off and I'm going to come in and put my brush down, and I might not share it like I used to. And there's no need. I've also had experiences where I've shared work that might have disturbed someone. I think I painted on somebody's wall once, and the picture was taken and shared, and people are like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm okay. I was having a great time, doing this thing." It was black ink on a white wall. That's what it gets to be a little darker. So you have to be conscious of a lot of these different aspects.
That's an interesting point you brought up there. Looking at we can get this in before the commercial break, but something about you said, like, I might not release it like I did before, because that's something I sometimes grapple with too. And we talk about art and censorship and obviously cancel culture and woke. There's a lot of things that happen, but I sometimes think that of course art involves, even when we look at the brain, like let's say for creativity, quieting the prefrontal cortex. Like the more judgmental side has to kind of go a little bit offline to allow connections to be made and to express what's happening there. But then, so you can let that in the creativity process of creating the art, but then what you release to the world, I don't know what you think about that. Do you think artists should at some level look at what they release to the world, or is it release it to the world and let the world do what it wants?
I think after that one incident where there was that, photo of that piece or that mural that went out and it upset at some people around me, right? And there was this question, do I have a responsibility as an artist to not upset people or to make people happy or to... I don't think you necessarily do have a responsibility unless it goes extreme and you're actually hurting people. You don't want to be hurting anyone. But for people to judge you based on it and come back at you, hey, you know what? It's dark today. It's light tomorrow.
Oh, sure.
It is what it is, right? I don't condone any kind of thing that makes anybody feel bad to extremes.
Right.
But at the same time, as I moved forward and I dealt with my stuff and I had clearings and things like that have happened positively, my expressions have also shifted where I do want people to feel good. I do want people to feel happy when they see my work. I do want them to feel like they can take the day just because they had a glance at a piece that they were walking out of the room with. So
and I guess, and then I'm glad you made that point, because definitely I think art can be very sad and make people feel it should make them feel the whole range of emotions. Sometimes there's art that can be, like you're saying, maybe hurtful or hateful. Right. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of more.
Sure.
Which, again, it's a lot of gray areas, so we're going to get it wrong a lot of times. But I think in the creativity process, anything goes when you're creating. Like, I also can imagine like a scientist in the lab, like creating all this stuff, but then what they decide to release to the world might be based on what's harmful or not harmful, but definitely not, because I think sometimes people take that to the extreme of if it makes people uncomfortable, which I don't think should be. Uncomfortable is not. Art actually does a great job of exposing injustices in the world that make people feel uncomfortable, or things that are uncomfortable feelings they don't want to face that actually can be very good. So I was just wondering about that, as you mentioned, like you might not release it. The artist of course has to take, I think, their own liberty of what they want to share.
I might not release it also because it just isn't pretty, or it's not something that actually was well thought out, or it doesn't have any kind of value for the general purpose of selling art, for example, right? That's we, at the end of the day, I am an artist, but I'm also a business, so it's like, what is the purpose of me expressing, like, splattering ink on a wall because I had a bad day? You know what I mean?
Right. And it could be therapeutic for you, just like art therapy.
Sure.
I'm not good at drawing, but I can draw and it might make me feel good. Now, would I release it? Not necessarily, because that's
unless it turns out cool.
Yeah. But that's even like art. Like everyone likes to dance, but we're not going to go watch everyone perform dance, because not everyone's going to do it at that level. Speaking of artists that do it at a level, I'm here with Ali Sabet, and we're going to continue the conversation after the break. Welcome back. Joined by artist Ali Sabet. And, Ali, as I mentioned, I appreciate you brought me one of your drawings behind me. And, when you draw now, you talked about working hours a day at it. And I really appreciate that, because I think we were talking, maybe it was off the air, about how talent is kind of overrated. It's about the hard work. So I think people watching you, they're like, this guy's just like a natural. And I think there is something very natural about it for you. But I think it could also be nice for people to hear how hard you work to develop your craft. So maybe you could talk a bit about that, what that practicing was like. Do you always feel like painting, or does it take like sometimes getting yourself going in some way? But maybe you can talk about just the practice.
The process and the practice. Yeah, the process. I mean, as far as practice goes, it is a daily practice that never stops. I always have a pen or a pencil or markers around. Typically in my pocket, and the use case has changed, right? Instead of using it to express what was back then, to try to escape, today it's to create, to heal, to love, to, and to sell, right? So it's a business as it is also a practice of art. But from a perspective of getting better, it is a daily, like, 3-hour, 4-hour practice. It was actually to express and to try different mediums. For example, people ask me, how do I find my style? I'm like, you do it by just doing it every day, consistently creating and finding other tools. Like if you're used to painting with, magic brushes, try, a Japanese brush, try some ink. It might not feel natural at first, but the effects that you get are cool, and then you layer it with something else. And that play, going back to being a kid, is where you find your next steps and where you want to be. Today I'm so busy that I don't get to play as much. My physical studio has been kind of shut based on the fact that I've been doing so much work digitally for the NFT space, right? And sometimes drawing 100 pieces in a month, getting ready for the next phase of the NFT drops and things like that you have seen. So it is something that needs to always happen. I even created a project called the Sabet Sketchbook Project to force myself to complete full sketchbook pages as full paintings, and then minting them as NFTs, selling them as NFTs, just to make sure that I continue that practice. It didn't even matter if I was going to sell them or not. Again, it was a self-forced project, just to build that practice back up. Is talent overrated? I think so. I think energy, vibration, and frequency is not. I think that's where everything comes together. Being able to raise your frequency, raise your vibration, whatever that means to you, whether it means like meditating, quieting your mind, lowering your anxiety, drinking matcha lattes, whatever it is, those things are what connects you to your source, your center, being alone, and then creating from that space is a lot more important than, trying to be better at drawing lips or drawing, eyes perfectly. There's a difference between being a technical artist and being a painter or being an artist in general, right? It's about self-expression or expressing what is versus whatever.
Well, and it's also interesting when you say what is, it's kind of like what is for you. Like there's something you have to tap into. So I think, when I see like artists, like again, like you learn some of the basics and the rules, but then there has to be something within you. Even as a therapist, I feel that when I've even talked to colleagues, we learn a lot of these techniques, like do this, but then when you kind of have to find your own style, which is something genuine within yourself coming out. If it's just like, okay, I'm supposed to do X technique at Y time, it's not going to be authentic and genuine for the person to connect to. There has to be something within you, and it takes time to trust that. I've realized even for myself, when you're first just a student, you're like, well, I have to just do what they tell me to do. Like I can't trust the voice within myself. But slowly, and often I'll have these, like an analogy or a metaphor comes to my mind, just like, and then I say it to the client. I used to probably not say it, and sometimes the client, that's exactly how it felt. And so there's some way of connecting to something that we have to trust. And I feel like as an artist, it's such an ultimate way. You have to trust yourself in that voice, because sometimes I've heard you say when you start drawing, you don't know what it's going to look like. Even you kind of just trust the process of what's unfolding and let that be expressed.
I mean, what you do for other people is multidimensional, right? Your presence is healing. Your presence is calming. When you're here with me, I'm in a state where it's like, hey, I'm not on a radio show every day, but I feel like I've been doing this for all my life, because you're like here, and I can connect to you, and I can kind of channel that. And I think that's what you start understanding, is that if you can connect to your source, whatever that is for you, for me, it's the Matrix and the universe and magical thinking and all this stuff that I like to do. And for someone else, it might be more practical, and and there's nothing wrong with any of it, right? I don't have a position that I want to sit here and push on someone else, but it's important. I think practice, however that is, just do it, And if I was to go back to talk to myself 10 years, 15, 20 years ago, I was like, paint and just share it. Because for me, I noticed that sharing it in front of people was important. I like that feedback. I need that validation, not so much today, obviously, but I needed it to grow. And I made a conscious decision to grow in front of people, meaning on Instagram, for example. From 2010, it was very conscious. I'm going to grow. This stuff that I'm doing isn't very pretty. It's not very good, but I'll share it anyway. Today, when I look back and I look at that, like let's say the female portrait that I did, it went from the head to the neck. It was missing eyebrows. I didn't even know. And I feel like I had the confidence of sharing it. I don't know why. I told you there was this sense of importance that was there. When I look back at that, I also understand that I had also made a conscious decision of growing in front of people, growing publicly. And I still see those strokes as powerful. I still see them confident, but maybe the technique and the expression wasn't on point. I got better at drawing faces. I got better at drawing eyes, but still, I still do them my way. I can draw a perfect eye probably if I sat there and put my time into it. I'd rather not.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't be your eye, like, you know, like that's there's something within it that you're expressing that is you, that's like your style, and like that's something, or just whatever you want to call it, something within yourself. But what I think is important, what you're bringing up, and maybe you can elaborate on it, because sometimes, you know, art obviously it's very romanticized, as it should be. It's tapping into something beautiful, emotional, something that makes us human. Sure. And so some artists, you know, I'll hear people think, well, you should paint or you should write when you feel like it. Like the inspiration has to hit you. And then there's some schools of thought, like I read a book, Seth Godin, The Practice, and others kind of, you just got, and even I think Stephen Pressfield in The Art of War, or The War of Art, he says you should be, you know, you got to do it every day. You got to be a professional. You got to like do it consistently. So you might not always like quote unquote feel like it or feel like so inspired. Yeah. And also the resistance can make you like, oh, like I'm not ready yet, but you might be afraid to put it out there. So I don't know, what is your thought? Is it kind of like you got to create and maybe it's somewhere in between.
It is definitely somewhere in between. There is times where you're not feeling it.
Right.
But what I do for myself is, for example, I'm painting digitally right now a lot, right?
Yeah.
I have 3 iPads. Each one is charged, so I have no excuse.
Yeah.
If I open it and it's not charged, I go to the second one. If that's not charged, there's the iPad mini. And if not, if I'm mobile, I have a mobile phone that's Samsung. I'm not a Samsung guy, but I made sure to buy a Samsung because it has a stylus and I can draw. If not that, I have a sketchbook and real pens and papers in my bag that I carry with me. So I don't give myself excuses to walk away.
And I think that's so, that's I think was so for me fascinating, is like that excuse, and because people find, you know, procrastination, usually we think of it as like being quote unquote lazy, but almost always it seems to be related to anxiety. And there's something about, as much as you love creating, we know there's an anxiety that can get in the way of putting something out there. There's still a vulnerability. I'm sure it's less now than it was, or maybe it could be both. Sometimes there's a pressure when you become more well known, but you know, there's an anxiety of creating and putting it out there because a lot can happen. So it's funny, even the way you're saying it, it's like you want to make sure, hey, look, there's no way out. Like
there's no way
if you can always find a way to do it. So what do you think that anxiety for you might be about that, like about creating, or what might get in the way for you?
There's times. My blockage comes when I start having a little bit of a argument with myself. Am I painting to sell, or am I painting to fulfill my own soul, right? So am I doing that? So I tend to be open, like I'll open a file or open a page and I'll stop painting for myself. And I'm like, no, dude, you're wasting time. You got business to attend to. You have 30 paintings that you need to do before, you know, Coinbase NFT starts in a couple of days. So there's real objectives that I got to do from a business perspective, and I know I can knock those out. No confidence issues there, and no confidence issues here. It's just, is this a waste of time because I'm exploring myself again, or because we already know what sells? Yeah. So as an artist, I think a lot of us go through that issue of like creating to sell or creating to fulfill ourselves, and finding that, and that takes courage to make that line thinner. Yeah. To get to a point where I can draw anything I want and I know that it's going to sell. Right. And that comes with time and your name being known, and at some point maybe I can just, you know, sign my name. And
I think you already have something. I love the way you sign your name on your work. But and I think when you look at your art, when you've told me about it, it does seem like there's some of that. You were doing art before, but it was very much like what other people wanted, you know, a logo for them. Sure. But now it's kind of blended to more, it's what you want. And I'm sure it's still, you know, it's still a dance. It's not going to be,
I mean, I draw the feminine portraits because I know that people accept them. It's interesting. It sells well, right? But I might be feeling like I want to draw a skull that day, you know? And the skulls do well too, but it has a smaller market. But I want to explore that, but I know that I need to do 3 of those and 1 of these, and it becomes a time management issue.
And that's another one of those things where, like, again, art is, I think it is so romantic and it's beautiful, but then again, we're human beings doing it, right? So there are, you have constraints of time and things that you have to figure out how to balance that. But I think I hope people also hear is, like, if you think about doing something creative, don't think like, you know, the stars never, I mean, yes, maybe sometimes they align, but a lot of times it's like you're going to have to do it and it still might not feel like, you know, it's right. Like, you know, you got to take some risk in that. It takes some courage, I think, often to put something out there that, you know, we think, well, you know, there's a famous painter, someone like you who's an artist, and think, well, it's just so easy for him every time. And I think it often is, but I'm sure there are still the struggles. And I share that, not so you have to share that you struggle, but that so people recognize it's still an experience.
No, it hasn't been easy at all. I mean, again, sitting there and painting and going, am I wasting my time? Am I, talk about 2015, sitting there at a coffee shop, and to not feel guilty, for example, taking time for myself. This isn't going to make any money. How am I going to feed my kids tonight? Or, how am I going to pay the rent? And I'm sitting here painting, drawing like little characters, bunnies and stuff. What are you doing with your life? You know what I mean? Or having someone walk in and judge you. So a lot of people are afraid of judgment.
Yeah.
So many of my clients, is Ali still drawing those Mickey Mouse things? That judgment is there, and you got to be like, I don't care. I'm drawing Mickey Mouse. What do you think? Like, go for it. Just do it. Just go paint, draw, whatever it is you want to do. Don't worry about how people think, and be kind to yourself. Allow yourself to take that 2 hours and paint without feeling like any obligations to the world. You have to put that time in for your family, but that 2 hours that you dedicate to your craft could possibly become your future, which we're here, and one of my friends did tell me in that coffee shop once, he goes, it's going to take at least 10 years. I'm like, 10 years? I don't have 10 years for you to make it as an artist, for example.
Right.
That was like 2005.
Wow.
It took like 14.
And I think, and that's the thing, and that's what, there's like a lot of quotes about like, don't worry about how long it's going to take. The time is going to pass, and either you'll be there or, it's like, you have clients like, I want to go back to school. And it's like, but it's going to take 3 years. I'm like, okay, look, 3 years will pass and you'll either have that degree or you won't. Yeah. It's going to be 2025. It's just like, what's going to be. So, the time, obviously we're impatient. We want things to happen, but, anything worth having takes time to build. And I think it's very cool to see your creative process. We're coming, about to wrap up the show for tonight. I really hope people will check out your art. Where would you say would be the best ways? I know you have the website. What's the website is? Just
sabet.art. You can go sabet.art. And if you're interested in the NFT world, you can check out the NFTs. There's a NFT link on there, and there's all my different collections. That's probably what's going on. Healingcodes.io. That's my new project. That's my new NFT project that deals with healing and mental wellness and physical wellness and things like that. We're creating a platform for people to share their gifts with people. And I think that's probably the fastest and easiest way to reach my stuff. And Instagram, obviously Instagram and Twitter @Sabet, SABET. And
I'll make sure we'll probably take a picture tonight and post it so people can find it on my social media in case you haven't found him yourself. But please check out his work. Ali Sabet is an incredible artist, a very kind human being. Ali John, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one note. A couple of days ago, I wrote something on Twitter. I said, and my friends used to always tell me it's about the journey. And I was like, I don't care about the journey. I just want the destination. Today I find out, and I kind of realized that it's neither about the journey or the destination. It's about the ever-present now. So
yes, it's
with
about
that,
the moment.
I thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for being in these ever-present moments with me today. We'll hopefully have you back soon. Again, a big thank you to Ali Sabet, and as always, a big thank you to Amir here in the studio. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Have a wonderful night.